Hello again, everyone. My name is Ali Balighi, and I'm going to present my research, some part of my paper named Resonant Ecology, Ethics, Listening, and Environmental Responsibility in Spatial Sound Art. In this presentation, I examine how spatial sound art contributes to ecological awareness and environmental ethics. My focus is not only on the artistic or technical dimensions of spatial audio, but on how listening itself can become an ethical practice. The central idea is that listening is never passive. When we listen to environmental sound, we enter into a relationship with land, with local communities, and with the more than human beings whose lives shape those soundscapes. This means that sound art can influence how we understand ecological crisis and how we position ourselves within them. Throughout the talk, I will highlight how spatial sound practices raise question of consent, cultural responsibility, and representation. This question matters because artists are not simply collecting sounds. They are interacting with the places and beings that produce them. By framing listening as an ethical encounter, I want to show how spatial sound art can foster a deeper sense of ecological responsibility. Spatial sound technologies allow us to create highly immersive listening environment. However, immersion is not automatically meaningful, nor it is always ethical. The way that sound is arranged, manipulated, and presented influences how people perceive the spaces and ecologies being represented. This means that artistic choices, such as which sounds are brought forward, which are minimized, and how listeners are positioned within the sound field, carry political and ecological consequences. These decisions shape narratives about place, and they influence how audience understand environmental issues, because environmental sound is often tied to specific lands, histories, and communities. Artists need to aware of how their work participates in broader ecological conversations. Ethical attention ensures that spatial sound does not become a neutral aesthetic experience, but a thoughtful engagement with the complexity of ecological crisis. When artists record environmental sound, they are entering into connect with a particular territory. That territory is not simply physical space, it's a culturally, historically, and ecologically meaningful. Sound is separate from the land that produce it and from the communities that are connected to that land. There is a risk, however, that artists may approach these environments as source of material rather than as places that require respect. Without careful consideration, field recording can become a kind of extraction where sounds are taken without meaningful relationship or consent. This is especially problematic in contexts involving indigenous lands or culturally sensitive environments. An ethical approach emphasizes reciprocity. It requires artists to ask who is affected by this recording. What responsibilities do I have to displace, and how can my practice contribute to rather than take from the ecological and cultural systems I'm engaging with. Decolonial listening challenges the idea that any artist can enter any environment and record freely. Instead, it asks us to recognize that listening is shaped by cultural histories, political structures, and power relationship. Many dominant approaches to sound art rely on Western assumption and uh, about access, authority, and artistic freedom. The colonial perspective reframes listening as a form of accountability. It encourages artists to learn from the knowledge system of the communities whose lands they are engaging with. In many indigenous contexts, listening is connected to responsibility, relationship, and care for place. Hearing the environment is not simply a sensory act, it is a way of participating in a larger ethical and cosmological framework. By acknowledging these perspectives, artists can approach spatial sound practice with greater humanity and with a deeper awareness of their positionality within broader colonial histories. One of the most significant ethical concerns in environmental sound art is the misuse or appropriation of culturally significant sounds. In some cases, artists incorporate field recording of ceremonies, community events, or sacred places without appropriate understanding or collaboration. This type of appropriation replicates colonial patterns by turning cultural knowledge and lived experience into static content. It reduces complex histories and relationships into material for artistic expression. For communities whose sounds are taken, this can be harmful and disrespectful. A more responsible approach involves building long-term relationships, engaging in dialogue, and sharing authority over how sounds are used. Ethical practice recognizes that sound belongs to communities and ecosystems, not just to artists, and that permission and collaboration are essential. Many environmental sound works include recording of non-human beings, such as birds, insects, marine life, or weather system. Multispecies listening invites us to hear these sounds not as background noise, but as expressions of living agencies. This begins participate actively in shaping soundscape, and their presence carries ecological meaning. Understanding non-human sound as meaningful challenges anthropocentric assumptions about who produce knowledge and whose voice matter. When we attend carefully to these sounds, we begin to recognize the complex relationships that form ecological communities. In this sense, multi-species listening is both ethical and ecological. It highlights the interconnectedness of life and encourages audience to think about non-human beings as co-inhabitants rather than a static object. Resonance is often understood as a physical phenomenon, but in ecological sound studies, it also becomes a metaphor for relationship. To resonate with a place means to be affected by it, to respond to it, and to recognize that one's presence has consequences. This perspective shifts the focus of sound art from control to relationality. Instead of shaping a soundscape from above, artists are encouraged to work with the environment in a way that reflects mutual vulnerability and shared space. Resonance suggests that ethic emerges from connection, not from domination. By adopting resonance as a guiding principle, spatial sound practice can support a more responsible and attentive engagement with ecological systems. Reveal listening is an example of how spatial sound can reveal ecological processes that are normally inaccessible by using hydrophones. The project brings attention to underwater ecology spaces that are rich with life but often overlooked by human listeners. What makes the project ethically significant is not only its technological innovation but its collaborative structure. The work involves partnership with local communities, researchers, and environmental organizations. These collaborations help ensure that the recordings are contextualized within broader ecological knowledge and local experience. The project demonstrates how listening can become a form of ecological witnessing. It provides audience with a sensory understanding of environmental change while also encouraging a sense of shared responsibility for aquatic ecosystems. Uh, Another example is glacier music. Glacier music integrates field recording, environmental data, and spatial sound diffusion to explore the dynamic of glacial environments. The use of spatial sound allows listeners to experience the temporal and spatial quality of ice movement in a more embodied way. This approach helps translate climate process into sensory experience by hearing the instability and fragility of glacial environments. Listeners can gain a deeper understanding of how climate change unfolds at different scales, both slow and rapid, both local and planetary. The project demonstrates how spatial sound can support ecological awareness by making scientific data emotionally resonant. It reinforces the idea that experiencing environmental change through sound can foster a stronger ethical response. Despite its potential, spatial sound also carries certain risks. One of these is over-staticization, the tendency to turn ecological crisis into a beautiful or immersive experience that distracts from the seriousness of the subject. When sound becomes too polished or too visually driven, it can create a sense of distance rather than connection. Another risk involves spectacle. If spatial sound is used primarily for dramatic effect, audience may focus more on the technology than on the ecological issues being represented. This can obscure the political and cultural context that give those sounds meaning. Ethical practice therefore requires artists to balance aesthetic impact with critical awareness. They must consider how their choice shape audience perception and whether their work promotes understanding or simply entertainment. Ecofeminists represent highlight the importance of care, vulnerability, and relationality in ecological practice. Listening, especially care for attentive listening, can embody these values. When artists listen with care, they acknowledge the fragility of ecological systems and the histories embedded with them. Sound art can create spaces where non-dominant voices are heard, not only human voices, but also those of non-human beings. Such work encourages audience to slow down and pay attention to what is usually ignored. By sharing authorship and inviting participants, artists can shift the focus of sound art from control to collaboration. Listening becomes a way of caring for relationships, recognizing interdependence, and valuing the voices that are often marginalized or silenced. Every decision in spatial sound composition, what to foreground, what to diffuse, and what to leave out, produce a particular representation of place. These choices carry social and political implications because they determine which experiences and perspectives are made audible. Ethical sound practice requires artists to consider whose voice are included and whose are absent. This is especially important when working with communities that have been historically marginalized or with environments that are threatened or exploited. By approaching sound with a justice oriented mindset, artists can use spatial audio to challenge dominant narratives, amplify overlooked experiences, and make space for forms of knowledge that are not always recognized. Looking ahead, the field of electroacoustic environmental art need to become more inclusive. This means expanding beyond Western academic frameworks and incorporating knowledge systems from different cultures, language, and ecological traditions. Collaboration will play a central role. Working closely with communities, activists, scientists, and educators can help create more grounded and contextually rich sound practices. Such collaborations allow artists to move beyond individual authorship and toward shared form of knowledge making. Education is also key. Pedagogical projects that emphasize local listening, field recording, and ecological awareness can help cultivate the next generation of artists who approach sound with ethical attention and cultural sensitivity. The ultimate goal of ecological sound art is not only to represent environmental issues but to contribute to meaningful change. Spatial sound has the capacity to reshape how people relate to ecological systems by creating immersive experiences that highlight interconnection and vulnerability. By focusing on resonance, artists can design work that emphasize shared presence rather than dominance. This aligns artistic practice with ecological principle of interdependence and relationality. Transformative practice requires humility, reflection, and sustained engagement with the environments and communities one works with. It asks artists to listen deeply and to use sound as a way of fostering ecological solidarity. To conclude, spatial sound art plays an increasingly important role in shaping how we understand ecological crisis. Listening is not merely an aesthetic act, it is a form of relationship that affects how we perceive land, community, and multi-species life. Ethical listening involves accountability, care, and attentiveness. It asks us to consider how sound practices interact with cultural histories, ecological systems, and political realities. By centering resonance and relationships, spatial sound can support more just and sustained form of ecological engagement. My hope is that these ideas encourage a deeper reflection on how sound can contribute not only to artistic expression but to environmental responsibility and ecological awareness. And also, it is some part of references that I use for my presentation. And finally, thank you very much for listening to my presentation.